I'm George Santoro. I'm 67 years old currently, and I was a football official, on-field official for 41 years. I officiated in the Western New York Certified Football Officials Group for all of those 41 years. I also officiated in the Eastern College Athletic Conference in Division III. Officiated in Division 1A in the Mid-American Conference. I also worked in the Arena League and several indoor leagues. So I've pretty much done everything in football officiating that there is to do, except work in the NFL. And that's something that everybody aspires to, but only a few people get to do because it's such a small group of officials. I started officiating because I wanted to be a football coach, and I was a teacher at the time. I taught for 36 years and wanted to coach football because I love the sport, and I was turned down. So I had a guy that I was working with whose father is Matt Sidlowski, who is also a very prominent past member of our group. And Matt Jr. Told me about high school officiating and asked me if I wanted to get involved. I did, took the classes, and the rest is history. I realized that I liked it. I realized that I was able to do well at it, and met a lot of nice people along the way.
And one of those nice people, of course, was Mike Perry.
Yes, absolutely.
Tell me how you met him. Tell me how that relationship started.
Well, Mike was a transplant, if you will, to Western New York. He began officiating in Syracuse and moved here for work, I believe, and transferred into the organization. I really didn't know Mike back then, but I got to know Mike through going to meetings and working some games with him, and then I was in college with Mike, Division III, and we got to work some games together in Division III. So I got to know Mike, fairly well as a friend and an official. When the University of Buffalo went to Division I in football, there were 4 guys that were fortunate enough to move into the Mid-American Conference because of a gentleman named Bill Wilson, who has really done a lot to promote officiating in Western New York. And Bill was instrumental in getting the 4 of us into the Mid-American Conference. And over the years, for various reasons, guys left, or in Mike's case, the accident, and I was the last one standing, so to speak, and had a great 14-year career in the Mid-American, and worked with Mike quite often. In fact, Mike was on my crew for many years. We worked our whole season together. We traveled together, as we did the fateful weekend that Mike was killed. We were traveling together in a game at Toledo, and they were playing the Miami Redhawks, and that's where actually I guess the whole story kind of takes place, is that particular evening.
So you finish the game, and you head back to the hotel, and then are you guys going out to eat, or tell me?
Yeah, we finished the game, and it was I don't know if it was, I don't think it was an afternoon game. It wasn't an early game, but it wasn't like an 8 o'clock start or anything like that. And we finished the game, and we got in the car, and we drove to a restaurant. We were going to head back to the hotel eventually, but there were some guys, we were in Toledo, Ohio, so there were some guys that were not only on the game with us that were from the Ohio area, but there were some other officials that lived close by that weren't on the game that wanted to have a beer with us and a sandwich after the game. So we met everybody at a restaurant, and had a little something to eat, had a beer, no big deal. But as we were walking out, I had the car keys in my hand, and Mike said, "No, I'll drive." And neither of us had, I think I had 1 or 2 beers at the most, and I think Mike had the same, if not less. But that was the way Mike was. He said, "No, I'll drive." And of course, that was probably one of the most fateful things that ever happened to me, because if I would have taken the keys, it would have been me behind the wheel, and I would have been the one that was hit by the driver at the intersection. So after we got in the car, I was tired. Just worked the football game, had something to eat, beer, and I have to be honest with you, I don't know what happened. I don't remember anything. I've since found out that it's very common if you're in an accident like that you do have a bout of amnesia, if nothing else. And the last thing, or the first thing I should say, that I remember is waking up, guys shaking me and asking me if I'm okay, and I had no idea what happened. I was sitting there, I was bleeding. My glasses were mangled in pieces. The car obviously was demolished, and Mike was sitting next to me dead. And that was the image, and that still is the image that haunts me to this day, because I had no idea what happened. Guys got me out of the car. I was very sore. I was very, disillusioned. I had no idea what was going on. Wrapped a blanket around me and waited for the ambulance to come, which took me to Toledo General Hospital. And that's where they ran some tests, obviously, to see the extent of my injuries. And then everything started to sink in, like Mike's dead, and we were in a very bad accident. What happened? Who was the person that did it? Why did this happen? All those questions went through my head. One of the toughest things that evening, or early morning, if you will, was I needed to call my wife, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to get her up in the middle of the night. I have a son who's physically and mentally disabled, and I just didn't want. I was okay. I was alive, so I felt that I didn't need to talk to her until the morning. But the hospital insisted that I call, and people that were with me insisted that I call, so I did. Obviously, very difficult phone call. Her sister, her twin sister, who lives in Cleveland, which is, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours away, got in her car and came to Toledo, which is exactly what I didn't want to happen. But anyway, that's what happened shortly after the accident. I was admitted to the hospital. I had fractured ribs. I had a punctured lung, and various other. I had bumps and bruises and scrapes. My face was all scraped up, but I was alive, and I was. I was very thankful. It was a very difficult time for me, because when you escape death that closely, it's something that you really changes your whole outlook. The interesting point is that it wasn't my first time. I was in a head-on collision a few years before that, several years before that actually, and the guy lost control of his car and came across the center line, hit me head-on, and I have a scar on my leg, and he died. He died in the accident. So I've been through it once, and it was tough to go through it again. But looking at it from another perspective, I'm very fortunate.
How would you say it impacts your life daily? How does it change your life?
Well, it's obviously, it gives you obviously a new appreciation for getting up every day and realizing that it just, wasn't my time. I've thought about several reasons why that could be. you really don't know. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, Mike Perry was a very giving person. I know a lot of people didn't really know a lot about Mike. They knew him as a, you know, a big red-headed Irishman who was always having a good time. But he was a very caring person. He always put other people first, and he was a very sensitive person. And you know, he took those keys from me for a reason that night, and I believe that that might have been his final act of doing good for a fellow human being, because that's just the way Mike was. I mean, if you needed anything, and I mean anything, Mike Perry was there for you. Without question, he was that kind of person. And to be able to see these in the camera or not, but this is Mike. This is a picture that Mike's wife gave me after he had passed away. I'm not sure what the reason for the photograph was, but that's really a good shot of Mike, because you can see that he's got that smile, that infectious smile, and he was just a big red-headed guy and a good guy. And he was just recently married. Okay, now this picture here, this is Mike working a game at the University of North Carolina, and this was one of the first games that we worked out of the conference, which was a big deal, and we worked the game between North Carolina and Miami of Ohio when Ben Roethlisberger was the quarterback for Miami that day, and this is the. And this actually turns into a funny story, because this is the coach from North Carolina, and there's Mike on the sideline, and you can tell that Mike's being approached and asked a question by the coach. Well, what the question was, I'm going to put the picture down and continue. What the question was that were there 12 men on the field for Miami? And that wasn't Mike's call. That was my call and the referee's call, and there weren't. But Mike had no idea, and he took a lot of abuse for the rest of the game because of us. But that was Mike, and we'd always made sure that we got on him about that sort of stuff. And it was fitting that, you know, and this was the year that Mike passed away. He died a few weeks later, so he got to work this game at North Carolina, and everybody brought their families, and we all had a nice weekend. But there's another part to the story. The next day, we were sitting in the hotel having breakfast, getting ready to go to the airport, and open up the local newspaper from, I don't know, I guess Chapel Hill, Raleigh, Durham, wherever it was, and there's the picture that I just showed you on the front page of the Sports. And Mike, well, we saw it, we all started laughing, and then Mike came down, and we just couldn't stop giggling, and all of a sudden, Mike saw the picture, and he got really, really upset, because he hated the notoriety. And the funny thing was, there was a guy that we didn't know sitting there having breakfast, reading the paper, and you could see the look on his face. He looked at the Sports page, and then he looked up at Mike, and he looked back at the Sports page, and we said, yeah, that's him. And of course, Mike was embarrassed, and we all had a good laugh over it. But that's, you know, we used to kid Mike a lot, and he you know, he took a lot of our abuse, but it was all in good fun.